Health insurance, pharmaceuticals, and corporate wellness and disease management are destroying our whole world. Carnivore is by far should be the basis of what everybody's doing,
Brett, how did you find carnivore?
not directly and not on purpose at all. Um, and technically, I really kind of, you would say, found carnivore through keto, and I guess that's a really great place to start. Back in October 2018 was my sister's birthday, and we got together for a birthday party for her, the four siblings and spouses, and celebrate that. And all of a sudden, I noticed my younger brother, who I hadn't seen in about 4 months, drop like 30 pounds, maybe 35. And I'm like, what is going on with you? And, we didn't want to dominate the conversation at the table with all that. He goes, I've been doing this low carb keto thing. And I'm like, huh. What struck me is I had, not too, a couple of years before that, I had spent a decade in the corporate wellness disease management worlds and selling to corporations of 100 to 50,000 employees their wellness and disease management programs. And in all of that time, I had never heard one person utter the word keto or even low carb in my whole life. And I'm like, well, what the hell is that? I just didn't have a reference point with it. But the next morning, I went down I live in the Milwaukee area, and I went down to Chicago to play a platform tennis tournament down there with one of my old college tennis teammates, one of my best buddies. And it was a very deflating experience because I had been obese and then at that point morbidly obese, and I stopped being what I used to refer to myself for years as being functionally fat. It had caught up with me, and it really dragged my game to new lows. And over the 12 years of that building, I'd had four different meniscus surgeries, two on each knee. And the arthritis that from those surgeries were starting to set in and create issues and problems. And so, with all of that, you know, I was thoroughly disgusted. I thought I let my buddy down because we just, drove down there to go play this tournament. And it was a big national, one of the four big national tournaments of the year. And so I came home just disgusted with myself. And I go, well, what is it my brother did? What is this low carb keto thing? And so Sunday, I start deep diving into what is this thing? And all of a sudden, I could imagine that I probably went like white, as a ghost, because I'm like, oh my God, some of this is talking about that LDL doesn't matter, that saturated fat is healthy. And I'm just like, the guidelines I sell, the coaching, because I was a certified health coach, but I was never a practicing health coach running sales and marketing for the wellness disease management company. I had to be certified because I'd pull an all-nighter like every other week, every third week, responding to a request for proposal from these really large organizations and the consultants that they work for so that my quote could be considered. And I'm like, oh my God, my brother's doing a fad diet and he might be a skinny guy in a casket. I'm going to go find the definitive research and show him that, he better smarten up a little. And that's where I was at that point. So then it's now, that was the like Halloween time, the last couple of days of October. And so over the November and December, I spent about 60 hours deep diving because I'm used to selling science. I mean, my corporate wellness programs, they were predicated on predictive modeling algorithms for 40 different disease states. So you fill out a health risk assessment online or in paper. We take a venipuncture blood draw, 40 chem blood panel, and we tell you, hey, you have these conditions that you didn't know about, or confirm that you have these ones that you have. And then we try to get, people to the doctor to talk about those things and get through risk stratification and try to catch try to make it a stent before it's a heart attack per se, just on that one condition. So I'm really, my job was to go to the national practice leaders and the medical directors, which are all MDs at the largest consulting houses across the country, and convince them we've got the best tools for helping, prevent all of these big claims that are coming down the road at you. And I also had a short stint in pharmaceuticals, and I come out of 30 years, well, call it 30 years of the health insurance world. And so actuarial underwriting science, understanding what goes into that from a life, disability, health insurance standpoint. So this had been my whole life: risk management, risk stratification, risk aversion. And so I go, well, I'll just go into PubMed and find the research that says you're hurting yourself. And I started getting lost because everything that I thought, I guess the easiest way to say it, Dave, is I broke my own brain. I started finding a number of people who I now consider just complete health heroes and information heroes in my life that I never knew existed before. And suddenly, and one of them, sorry, didn't think I'd do this, is Dr. Sarah Hallberg. Have you heard the name? Dr. Sarah Hallberg? Well, when I first got introduced to the concept of disease reversal, she did a TED talk in around 2013, 2014 that was circulating on YouTube. And it's all about, and everybody should go find and watch this. It's how you have to ignore the guidelines to cure obesity and type 2 diabetes. And I'm just sitting there going, it's not a chronic progressive disease. These aren't things that these are things you can overcome. And it was such an incredible epiphany for me. And she went on to leave the University of Indiana, kind of out of Purdue area, and as a obesity researcher and clinical person. And she became the medical director at Virta Health, and you might have heard of Virta Health. And so some of my other heroes are Dr. Stephen Finney, Tom Volek, who, have you heard the story about the billionaire that found them and created Virta Health? Are you aware of the background on that?
No, I'm not sure the story.
I'll keep it really short, which for me is sometimes hard because I like to talk a little. But what happens is that so right around this time, I find out about all four of these people. And so there's a guy who's a billionaire. He sold his company like Zillow to Zillow. And so he's now like 50 years old. He's competing in the Hawaii Ironman competition and wins the 15 over category. So, one of the fittest guys, at least 50, but really of almost any age, because that's serious competition going on there. And he comes back from that and he finds out he's so pre-diabetic, he's almost full type 2 diabetic. And I'm like, so this is all of this comes together in 2, 3, 4 days of finding these different people. So he, now you could say retired billionaire, all the time and money in the world to dive into this. He goes and finds, how can this be? I'm the fittest 50-year-old in the world. How can I have this situation? And as he starts deep diving it, a little bit like I did years later, I'm just like, or he's like, oh my God, all this carb loading and all the stuff I've been doing for my training, everything has taken a toll on my body. He finds Volek and Finney, who have this book right here, the art and science of low carb living. And then there's another one related to training that they have as well. And they then also found Dr. Hallberg right after she gave her TED talk, and they created Virta Health. And they're now a disease reversal company calling on big Fortune 500 corporate America. And that's when I'm like, oh my God, I've been doing it, or my company and the whole industry, and thus all of healthcare has been doing this wrong for the last 50, 60, 80 years. Ever since I trace it back to the invention of insulin to be injected into people, because we use the ketogenic diet for diabetes and epilepsy and all of these things prior to insulin really being around and medications and such. So anyhow, so with all of that, that was just a huge jaw-dropping epiphany to me, and I kept going down the rabbit hole, down the rabbit hole, and that's where I then found Gary Taubes and Nina Teicholz and their books and their stories and all their YouTube presentations out there, and I started finding there's these low carb Australia, low carb Breckenridge, and just conferences of people that are kind of leaders in this whole space. And it just like, oh my God. So as November started becoming December 2018, I've got myself completely, my brain is no longer just broken. I'm now just trying to learn as much as I can learn. And I decide, well, one is the time where everything, people start their goals, their New Year resolution and everything. But I start phasing in low carb. I stop eating the stuff that I realize turns to sugar the second you start metabolizing it, the bread, the pasta, the cookies, all, the crackers, all that kind of stuff. And so over December, I lose a few pounds, but I go all in January 1. And over that next 9 months, I dropped 115 pounds. And I hope I don't have to reference this again, but the reason I just got emotional there is Dr. Halpern died of cancer 2, 3 years ago. And she's young, mother, wife. And I just like feel like I owe her my whole life. Sorry. Because she was that inspirational in helping me understand that, oh my God, health insurance, pharmaceuticals, and corporate wellness and disease management are destroying our whole world. We need to get it back. We need to go fight the battle. And she's so passionate. So I never actually thought that could. I'm sorry, I'm such a mess right now. So anyhow, shake that off, go other places. So I dropped like 60 pounds in the first 2 months. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to get back in the corporate wellness disease management world. I had been out since 2014. And I wind up calling a guy who I used to compete against at another corporate wellness company. He just started at a disease management company. And I reach out to him and he answers my call, as I used to try to sell him my tools to use at his company. Many times we went head to head. Sometimes he'd win, sometimes I'd win. But we knew each other. We had a few dinners and stuff like this one because we'd be competing at the same employer. And I'd have the 10 o'clock slot. He'd have the 11 o'clock slot. We'd meet at I met him checking into a hotel. I saw his business card once. And I go, oh, do you have the 11 or the 9 o'clock slot? I've got the 10 o'clock slot tomorrow at this client, and I wound up winning that one. But that's how we met. And so we had this very friendly, competitive thing. And, and I started telling him, I go, I've lost 60 pounds last 2 years. I've realized that Verta Health is the way of doing all of this. It's the ketogenic diet. It's nutritional ketosis. And, I had yet to understand that there was a carnivore variation of this yet, but I was just kind of getting into what we would call metabolic or medical strength ketosis would be. And so Dr. Westman out of Duke, who grew up just 90 miles up the road from me here, and we're only a year apart, and we've got mutual friends, I now know. But under 20 carbs a day, you're pretty much guaranteed success. I was kind of doing the 25 to 30, and I was kind of in the net carb until he helped me realize, no, it's all about full carbs. Net carb is just a marketing thing for people to sell more processed crap. And anyhow, so I wound up jumping back in with the disease management world, thinking, oh my God, I'm going to go change the whole world. This is going to be just awesome. So in my office of that time in my old house, I get up and I accept the offer and I just kind of start pacing in my office. I'm just like so amped up that I'm going to change the world. And all of a sudden it hit me because I'm in my head. I'm saying to myself, I'm not on metformin. I'm not on blood pressure medication. I'm going to be thin again in a couple more months. And I'm like, This is amazing. And all of a sudden it hit me. Two things hit me. And I go, oh my God, Brett, you're being a complete fool. Um, I know better than having that thought go through my head because, the guy who just won the 50 Ironman competition was almost a type 2 diabetic. And when I was in college, the number one selling book in the bookstore was Jim Fixx's. I can't remember whether it's the Bible on running or whatever it is, but I don't know if you know of him as an author and everything in his story. But in around 50 years old, he looked like an Adonis and he dies on a 5K run of a heart attack. And so those things hit me in my head and had been playing heavily in my head the last number of months. And I'm just like, well, when I first entered the corporate wellness industry in when I was 45 years old, 10 years earlier, I'd gotten a CT heart scan and I came back with a 0, so no plaque in the arteries. Awesome. Went and celebrated with a quarter pounder with cheese. And true story, as sick and demented as that is. And then I wind up, so I say to myself, well, if I can go get another now 10 years later CT heart scan and have no plaque in my arteries, then I can start considering celebrating. But until, no way. So I start at that company. That week, I go get another CT heart scan at a local healthcare system, $50, self-refer yourself in. 2 days later, they call me up, Mr. Smith, you have a CAC score of 268. 100 to 400 is considered intermediate risk. Over 400 is considered high risk. And I'm like, oh my God. Over the last 10 years of putting on all the weight and the stress of, we'll just call it life. We won't go down all those different rabbit holes, but stuff happened. Plaque started forming. And so I realized, back with my epiphany on Virta Health and type 2 diabetes and everything in the metabolic syndrome panel, that, and again, one of the people that I first came across was Ivor Cummins. Are you familiar with who Ivor is? At the time, he was president of the Irish Heart Awareness Foundation. And I just learned so much from him in those first couple months. And so I now dove into his channel, and over the next year, I watched every single thing that he had. And here's another kind of funny, small world little scenario. So back when I first started in the corporate wellness, when I was around 45, I just it was like hitting a jackpot. I sold so many great accounts here in the state of Wisconsin, Wausau Papers, Appleton Papers, all of these big companies that everybody around here goes, oh my God, you got all those as clients? Well, it winds up that one of the people who was on the wellness committee at Wausau Papers was probably the guest on Ivor's podcast that made the most impact with me. He, at Mayo Clinic, doing an executive physical, again, 10 years probably earlier than this now, found out that, had a CT heart scan and found out that he had a lot more plaque than me. And they told him, go get divorced, move to California, start selling surf wax, enjoy your last couple of years because there's nothing we can do about all of this. He had PhD level experience, was the only guy from his college that didn't go pre-med coming out of this. Guy's a brain and a half and just incredible. And his company, had him working about 2 hours a day and letting him spend the rest of the time, about 15,000 hours, so he says, over years of digging into all the science and all of this. And he reverse engineers, how do you reverse plaque? And if you go to if you've seen the brain, the wheat belly books and everything, another doctor, cardiologist out of Milwaukee here, and that's where it was his heart scanning centers that Bill Davis, that I had my first scan at. And he learned, in all this wheat belly stuff is my understanding of the story. I might be a little wrong on this, but Patrick Thuet, who is the guy from up in Wausau Papers, who had the heart scan, had 30 scans and documented his reversal of the plaque, and from what he did with this 15,000 hours of digging into the science. And so I'm like, okay, well, I suddenly watched every one of Patrick's videos over the next 2-3 months that I could find anywhere online, anything that he's written, anything about him. And because he had a protocol he talked about, and I started mimicking it. And, you know, you don't go get a heart scan every, 30, 60 days or anything like this. So, I'm going, okay, in a couple of years, I'll get another one. I'll see how this is all doing. Well, the boss I told you about that hired me in the new disease management company I was at, when I told him about my heart scan, and he's like 5 years younger than me, he goes and gets one, and he had a score comparable to mine. And when he was at one of a benefits conference out in California, he came across this company, Pulse Cardiac Test, and they had a venipuncture blood draw that could show the soft plaque risk that you have going on, the kind of the accumulation. They give you like the equivalent of a CAC score based on what's going on with your blood. And they measure all the different aspects, 250 different aspects, or out of the 250 different, what we'll call just chemical composition of the plaques in your artery. They zeroed in on the 16 most relevant aspects and then took it to the NIH, and the NIH did additional studies and everything with it. And they said, yep, this is a for real awesome thing. And so we're in California together because he goes, Brett, you've got the best connections and I have the best connections out of the other people and the salespeople in California. Let's go do this trip. So on the third day, we wake up and, he goes, well, I've got an appointment at this cardiac company. If you want to come with, you're welcome to. But if you want to just drop me and go to a restaurant and work from there, I'll call you, tell you when to come pick me up. And you're going to a cardiac company? He goes, yeah, I knew you couldn't pass up on this, because he knew how obsessed I was with all of this and what I talked to him about this all the time. And so we go and we're sitting there and I'm listening to my manager get his pulse score read back to him and the test explained to us. And already at this point in our talk, you probably are going to say, Brett, there's no way you sat there and just didn't talk and shut up. But the doctor turns to me, goes, do you have any questions? I go, well, let me get this straight. So you've got a venipuncture blood draw that shows soft plaque that we don't see in a CT heart scan. That's just the calcified plaque. And you can also tell whether the disease is progressing or whether healing's happened. He goes, yeah, that's a great elevators. Those are all the main bullet points. I go, do you have a vena? Can you do a blood draw here? Do you have a phlebotomist on staff? He goes, do you want one of these? I go, and then my manager goes, yeah, Brett just lost 115 pounds. It was the month that I just hit the 115 pound off. And he, but Brett found out he also has a calcium score 6 months ago. And so, and the doctor looks at me, I go, yeah, but I found a protocol that I think is going to reverse it. And also I'm feeling pretty good about it. And he kind of looks at me a little cross-eyed, like, are you nuts? There's nobody does that, because he hadn't found wheat belly and all of these other things yet. So long and short of it is, I have the test done. He comes back and verifies. 2 weeks later, we do a Zoom call, and he's like, yep, you already knew you had the plaque. But he goes, I really wish we would have done one of these 9 months earlier on you before you started all this weight loss. I would have loved to have a baseline, when I was no longer functionally fat, but fat, obese. And I go, yeah, I would have loved to have one there too. But he goes, the good news is you're in a complete healing mode. So whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. And so I keep deep diving and I become obsessed. And I got to quick show you one little thing here in my office. So I don't know if you ever heard of the Gallup Corporation.
That is stats and stuff.
Yes, absolutely. So they do polling and a lot of consulting and a lot of different things. And back in 2000, they published a book based on findings that they had called Know Your Strengths. And so they looked at 30,000 executives and high achievers around the world, interviewed them, and they isolated, there's 34 strengths that you can leverage as an individual. And then you take this long test and it comes back with 1 through 34. Here's your profile. Here's your DNA of your strengths. And the top 5 are the ones you should focus on to make you a success, because you're never going to take 29 to 34, because those aren't native and natural for you. Those are hard things for you to improve, but concentrate on, using your strengths. Well, the only reason I show you this is that, so I took that test in 2000. I took it again in 2013 when I was running sales for a company, and had all of us do it so we could it's like a personality test type of thing. You can understand people better and everything. Well, the first, the 4 of these things Woo, ideation, strategic, and achiever. The 3 times that I had taken the test prior to 2019, they were all in my top 5. And there was one that got moved out. Learner, which became number 1, was always 18, 19, 20, the 3 previous times I had taken this test. And when I started at the new disease management company, who was using this as part of their HR and personality test and everything inside of the corporate environment, and I told them and I showed them my 3 previous tests of doing this over the last 20 years. And they're like, that's not supposed to happen. These are pretty hardwired in you. You should not have something move from 19 into your top 5, let alone number 1. And the only reason I'm telling you that is going down this whole journey in that first 60 hours and then finding out I had the heart disease and watching myself melt away in the mirror in front of myself and in front of the rest of the world. Everybody thought I had cancer because nobody drops that amount of weight that fast without there being a medical condition involved. And I'm just like, I became obsessed with having to learn more and learn more and learn more and deep dive, deep dive, deep dive. And that was never me. I was a PR major and a marketing minor, and I spent my whole career in sales. I'm like now obsessed with like trying to create my own personal PhD programs in ketogenesis science and just disease reversal, everything having to do with all of this stuff. It just became an obsession. My wife came into the house one day, and I'm sitting in front of our big screen TV, sitting on the floor, watching science presentations on a Saturday where normally I'd be watching a Badger football game. My little W here. And she goes, that's it. I'm going to have you committed. You have complete, I don't even recognize who you are anymore because you're spending all of your time just researching this science crap. And I go, everything's so screwed up. There's answers to everything going on with all the people we know and us and everything, and it just became, and there's so many people around me that are just like, Brett, would you shut up? We don't want to talk about health ever again with you because I just go. It was a very transitional time in my life, and you could say it's one of those things that I had to learn how to control because even though I was never a certified, or excuse me, while I was a certified health coach, I was never a practicing health coach. Realizing what I was able to do for me, and then you start paying attention to what everybody and loved ones and friends are doing all around you. Sometimes I just didn't bite my tongue and I'd open it up and you step on the relationship and you have to realize they didn't ask to be in your coaching program. And I didn't have a coaching program, but I just wanted to share. How do you not share if you know you can radically improve somebody's life and health and all of these things? How do you stay quiet? Well, there are a lot of people for a while really wanted to avoid me and not be around me because it took quite a while. And you could still say I have issues with not speaking my mind or sharing information at times because it just can, and I've changed people's lives. So I'll quick finish this part of the story. And then if you have questions, because we're already half hour in, but so in end of 2019 or during 2019, that year, I've got all the weight loss going on and everything. So I played college tennis and I still play tennis. I play another sport called platform tennis. It's more of an outdoor winter sport, similar to pickleball, but with like screens and walls like squash and racquetball. And you can play balls out of there. Anyhow, so I've got a lot of buddies at this platform tennis club. And that was what I went to go play with my friend in Chicago after my sister's birthday. And I'm on a pickleball court summer 2019. And 2 brothers that I grew up playing tennis with are on the court. One of them's a cardiologist, and another good friend of mine who I play a lot of pickleball and I introduced to platform tennis, paddle, we call it. He's a healthcare actuary. And so I'm used to working with actuaries. And then he lost like 20 pounds 5 years earlier. He figured out this whole low carb kind of stuff and followed the science. He knew who Lustig was and Ludwig was and all these different people. He goes, oh my God, this is great. You're obsessed with it. I don't have to follow anymore. If I have questions, I'll just ask you. And so he goes, I can go concentrate on other things. Anyhow, so the 4 of us are on a pickleball court, and the one brother says, hey, Brett, did you hear about Ryan's heart attack? And Ryan's warming up next to me as my doubles partner on the pickleball court. And I'm like, I look at him, I go, I just saw you at the club all winter long. It's only been 6 weeks since I've seen you. You've had a heart attack. You're on a court playing again. What's going on? How can this be the case? And he goes, well, it was just, we caught it early. It was a minor heart attack, just had 3 stents. And, and I had already known, I'm like 3-4 months into knowing I had my CAC score and everything. And I now a couple hundred hours into just how do you reverse heart disease? How do you reverse heart disease? Every interview that I ever did with a heart expert around the world. And I've known Ryan since I was 17 and he was 16, tennis lessons growing up and everything. And then we taught at the same country club together as tennis pros and played men's adult tournaments together on the summers. And I knew he lost his dad heart attack, which is why he became a cardiologist. So anyhow, so he's like, well, Sean has been, kind of vegetarian for a while. We're both going vegan. And I'm like, and now as a health coach, I'm not going to try to talk somebody out of vegan or vegetarian. I'm just going to lay out the information. And as long as you're in nutritional ketosis, you can attack it from a lot of different ways, all the way from carnivore to vegan. There's ways of doing it. I'm going to lean more towards the carnivore way. I'm going to share as much information to bring that around. But you got to meet people where they're at, or you're not going to start helping. So, and I go, God, I think you're going way down the wrong path on this. And he goes, well, Brett, I am a cardiologist. I go, yeah, but your CAC score was 3 times mine, and I had 100 pounds on me that you didn't have, And so we start kind of going back and forth, and he's sitting there. Now, I have permission to tell these things, and this is all going to come out on our shared podcast we're launching in a couple of weeks. So not talking out of school here, but he's like eating out of a baggie Wheaties on the side of the court. And I'm just like, that just turns to sugar once you metabolize it. Why are you doing that? And he go, and he's like, Brett, I am a cardiologist. And I go, anyhow. So the same way that a year earlier I broke my brain, I start sharing studies with him over the next 4 or 5 months. And he's like, suddenly I can watch all 3 of us, the other guys, his brother and my other actuary friend and I, because we played a number of times that summer on the court together. And he'd make a mistake. He'd hit a ball in the net. He'd get mad at himself, but he looks up at me and he goes, healthcare's so screwed up. And he's screaming this out loud at public courts and, just melting down. And the actuary and I are like, yeah, we got him. He's, he's starting to understand just how screwed up everything is. Well, 3 months later, we're playing at a platform tennis event in November. And he pulls me off to the side and he goes, got to come clean with you. What do you mean? He goes, well, I went to whom me and all my cardiologist buddies think is the leading lipidologist, cholesterol doctor in the state. She's young, she's independent, she doesn't work at a system, she doesn't take insurance, $500 hour, $2 minimum first appointment. So $1,000 to see this lady. And he goes, I'm going through my interview with her. And she's like, we get to diet. And he goes, well, I got that nailed. I'm vegan. I don't eat meat. I don't eat fish. I don't eat eggs. She goes, why are you avoiding the most bioavailable, nutrient-dense food you can eat? And he goes, but I eat all these, whole healthy grains and everything. And she goes, why are you doing that? That's what's going to screw up your chemistry. And he goes, God, you sound a lot like my friend Brett. And she goes, well, what does Brett do? Well, he's been in healthcare sales most of his life, I guess. And, and she goes, isn't it funny how the salespeople can figure this out, but you cardiologists are all just completely lost. And he's telling me this, and I'm like, validation, and that's big for him to come and share and admit all of this stuff with me. And so so I'm just like, oh yeah, I just flew back. I was at a benefits conference in San Francisco. And I had a 4-hour layover, and I started writing this guide that, because so many people have come up to me and asked me about stuff that I don't have 20, 30 hours to try to explain it to everybody. So I wrote my last year journey of who I found, the books I did, the videos I watched, and everything, the studies. And it was at that point in time 12 pages. It went to 36 pages when I shared it with Ryan, and it got up to 65 pages. And he goes, "Can you give me that?" And so he rewrote it. Now, he worked at the time for the largest health system in our state and then merged with the largest in Illinois. So between the two states, the largest brand around. The compliance department approved it. And he started handing it out to hundreds of his clients, of his patients. He's like, "I've never had success like I'm having now, where getting people to go low carb and everything." And now he's in Provo, Utah, working for a system out there. He's chief cardiologist at that hospital, and he's creating for that. And this is a big, large named system that people around here would all know if you follow healthcare. And he's starting the first metabolic cardiac practice for that system in the country. And we're working on now creating our own podcast called Metabolic Matters that we're going to be releasing. And what I thought was going to be a book of mine about keto and everything. And as the last couple of years the journey has evolved and all of these things, and I've learned more and more and more, and I've come to realize, I'm like, the world doesn't need another keto book. There are great, fantastic keto books out there, but this is all about metabolic therapy. And once you reach the physiologic state of nutritional ketosis, and you're back in what I believe and thousands of doctors now believe is our native metabolic state. It's the state that the body heals in. It's the state that everything happens in. And now you start following podcast channels like Metabolic Mind, and who's emceed and medical director, Dr. Brett Scher, cardiologist. Back in 2018, I first found him as the low carb cardiologist out of San Diego. And then Diet Doctor made him one of their medical directors, and he did everything at Diet Doctor for years. And then a year and a half ago, Metabolic Mind stole him from Diet Doctor. But we now know that, and Dr. Chris Palmer, Brain Energy, Dr. Georgia Ede, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. These people are reversing major depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, by just like Mayo did in the 20s with epilepsy and kids on the ketogenic diet. And then Jim Abrams, also from Milwaukee, who created the movie Airplane and huge major movie producer in Hollywood, had an epileptic kid and they weren't getting any results. And he went into the medical library at UCLA, and found the ketogenic diet. And the doctors, "Oh, we don't do that." And finds a dietitian out at Children's Hospital here in Milwaukee, who's one of the leading ketogenic nutritional or dietitians in the world, wrote the guidelines on epilepsy, writing them now on mental health with all of the people at Metabolic Mind and all these other people across the country. She's fantastic. We did coffee together back in November because I found her on a different podcast out of the UK. And I go, "Oh my God, she lives 10 miles from me." And so I reached out and we got together. But anyhow, so long and short of this is what is happening with metabolic therapy. Dr. Matthew Phillips in New Zealand with Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, glioblastomas. You get a glioblastoma diagnosis, you've got a 12 to 15 to 18-month death sentence. He's dissolving and getting rid of these tumors with the keto diet. It's nutritional ketosis. And keto is a loaded word. People don't understand. Every processed food company's trying to find a way to put it on their package, and low carb this, and net carb that, and all this crap. And but when you really understand that 90% of what we go see the doctor for, if you just go back and ate like our great grandparents ate, which they all lived in nutritional ketosis almost all the time because they had no choice. They didn't have 6 Coca-Colas a day in 1910. There wasn't Pringles, potato chips, and those were things that people maybe had at a birthday party once a year. It wasn't 6 meals and 3 snacks a day. We've just so changed the terrain, the environment that we live within. We've created where the kids are all fat, the kids are all coming out of high school, not even eligible to go in the military because they're too obese and they're already type 2 diabetics. not all of them, but enough of them. It happened to me. It's happened to, I've got really close friends who have been diagnosed pre-diabetic and type 2 diabetic ever since I started this journey. So as I'm coaching people these last few years, and with so Ryan also, the cardiologist I'm doing this with, he had other stents put in, but what the radiologist came out and like, you've like reversed 60% of the soft plaque that you had in your arteries from where we were last year in here. And, and so he did the pulse test with me. And then when I, at my 1 year mark from the first time I told you about, and the doctor that invented that pulse cardiac test, he goes, Brett, you've reversed 85% of the soft plaque out of your arteries in the last year. What have you been doing? Because he didn't realize these protocols could work. And I'm like, the same thing I told you I was doing when I was in your office a year ago. And I had then Ryan with me on a Zoom call. And they're like, because the Dr. Harrington from Pulse goes, well, let's go through Brett's results because he's got year over year. And then we'll get into Dr. Cooley's results. And so Ryan and I are just sitting there listening to how I've like completely wiped out my heart disease as measured by the pulse cardiac test. And we come back and then we go through his results and everything. And the next day we're on the pickleball court again. Well, what do you think about this? I've been watching this now for a year and I got him set up with it and all. And he goes, none of us in cardiology pay attention to any of this stuff. All these metrics that measure what's going on, I've never heard of half of them before, other than I know they're in a medical textbook somewhere, interleukin 6, and all these different things. And so I called the company the next day, and within 48 hours, I'm the pulse cardiac sales rep for the state of Wisconsin and Northern Illinois. Unfortunately, this is during the heat of COVID going on, and doctors aren't seeing their own patients, let alone yet seeing a rep for a company and a test they've never heard of before. And the company kind of dies on the vine, and all 32 sales rep over the next, after I'm there about 9, 10 months, 12 months get let go, and it kind of shrivels up and goes away. And it's a life defining, changing type of a thing that we need to have brought back again. I just found a new client that I work with early mid May, and we're talking and communicating, and I go, well, if you're going to do this, you need to have the right food in the house. So we meet at Costco. We do a half hour, 45 minutes shopping, teach her how to read the labels, understand what's going on, all this stuff. And this is a lady who, a lot of health issues, decades of health issues. Very educated woman, great professional job during her working career. She's now 70, just works a little part-time for a local healthcare system. We go our own way. She has her groceries. I call her back 3 days later. Just, how's it going? Are you doing it? Are you using it? What are you finding? She goes, oh, well, I still had the old food in the house and I don't want to throw that away. I go, don't be penny wise, pound foolish and mess with your health. Start now, get healthy, throw it away, let your brother eat it who lives with you, whatever. Donate it to to a pantry, but now we're just poisoning those people. And anyhow, over the last 7 weeks now, she actually the year prior or year and a half prior lost 120 pounds. She went on Wegovy, one of the GLP-1s like Ozempic, but then after a year, about 7 months ago now, 8 months ago, it stopped working because the body's always looking for homeostasis. It's always trying to find, and that's why we always have to increase blood pressure and glucose and stuff, because if you don't get to the root cause underlying disease, it's still going to find a way to manifest and keep getting worse if you're just covering it up with a pill. So I started, when I first met her, I started explaining, she told me this, and I said, well, you can create all the GLP-1 you want naturally just by how you eat. And Virta Health just did a study, which I just saw come out 2 months ago, where the first study in the world where when people came off of GLP-1, any of these, Ozempic, Wegovy, whatever, that they can not gain all the weight back. Because every other person who's ever come off of one of those drugs, all the weight just comes back because they never got taught how to eat. They don't understand that they're eating garbage. And she goes, yeah, I stopped it. And within a couple of weeks, I gained 20 pounds right back right away. So I went back on it, but I'm not losing anything anymore. So she was primed to be receptive to what I was saying. But, she was kind of hunched over. She goes, I'm in pain every step I take and whatever. So we got together just yesterday. about 7 weeks now of working with her. And she goes, check this out. Because she was sitting behind her wheel. I was in the passenger seat. And she jumps out of the car. She walks around to the sidewalk. And she's like winking and, twinkle in her eye and just light footed walking down the sidewalk. And then she gets in the car. She goes, well, what do you think? I go, well, you look really happy and everything. I go, what was it you were exactly trying to get me to see? She goes, did you see how effortlessly I was walking? She goes, first time in 15 years I've walked without incredible arthritic pain. It's been crippling in the last 2 or 3 weeks. The fat adaptation's going on. She's no longer sugar burner. She's moving into being fat adapted. She got a keto mojo. And after fasting, and she gave me permission to share this information, after having fasting glucoses of 120s for a couple of weeks, she was in the 90s. She just sent me one today, 81. 1.1 ketone. And it's just like, it's changing her whole life. It's just a couple of weeks.
Have you transitioned at any point to carnivore, or are you still doing about the 20 odd grams of carbs a day?
Well, when I first joined that disease management company that gave me this, March 2019, the guy who was running IT there, I started talking to him and people are like, he's a carnivore. I go, what's a carnivore? And so he started turning me on to Sean Baker and other different folks that we both know. And I started paying attention to this. And I, even before learning that, because I was spending so much time in all of this, I called myself a ketovore, and I actually even changed it to a nutrivore because I just realized I need to eat the most nutriently dense, bioavailable, because you can eat this plant that says it has 6 grams of protein in it, but only 30% of it's absorbable and you can use. So you have to eat 6 times that amount of it to do the same thing as a 3-ounce piece of steak or an egg or whatever. And so I naturally started then moving towards being carnivore, but because you have to appreciate also, I had so much success that very first year and reversed my heart disease. And I was still eating some asparagus and broccoli. It'd be a steak on the plate or 6 eggs on the plate or fish, air fried fish fryer with pork rinds as the breadcrumbing on the fish. Fish fries are big around where I'm from here. And so anyhow, but it wasn't like I was ever, going down the road on salads all the time or anything. I never ate salad. I would have a small handful of berries with at least a meal a day. I might have a side dish of broccoli or asparagus. But now, over the last 3 years, I've really kind of taken a couple other turns on all of this. And because as I was kind of thinking I was going to write a book on ketosis and keto and everything, and I'm trying to understand, well, what's really happening? How is it working as a signaling molecule on the mitochondria and all these different things? And you wind up realizing nutritional ketosis and everything about metabolic health is really centered on not the ketone as much. It's a major important aspect of everything, but it's your mitochondria. And that really all of these things that we're now realizing with the metabolic mind and psychiatric metabolic psychiatry and everything, that it's mitochondrial dysfunction that's going on in our body. And so as I've been going the last 3 years down that rabbit hole, I really stopped even writing a book and writing content for my website and for coaching and everything, because I started realizing there's so much more that needs to be understood. If you have a bad circadian biology and you're not getting the right amount of sun and you've got too much blue light because of these screens and phones and the LED lights in our environment, you become insulin resistant for that. You can be eating perfectly. And if you're a heavy duty tech person and you're doing it late at night and early in the morning, and you're not getting you can still be messed up and not be making progress. And so there's a heavy duty aspect to understanding circadian biology. There's what's called quantum biology. Have you ever heard of Dr. Jack Kruse? That's somebody who I've dived a couple hundred hours, and then all of, if you want to call them the Jack Kruse disciples, but the doctors and the PhDs that have also picked up on that message of circadian biology and quantum biology, and how when you get into the electron transport chain that's happening inside of these mitochondria, that complex one is where the glucose comes in. That's where all the free radicals come and all that reaction reactive oxidative stress is coming from. And it's complex too that the fatty acids are coming in and almost no reactive oxygen species. But then you start hearing about, I for a couple of years heard people talk about deuterium, and I never understood it. And I always used to have to go to these websites that there's one called like MedCram that med students use when they're cramming for tests and they have to remember something. They can watch a quick lecture on the electron transport chain, or you name whatever the thing is that's going to be on the test. And because I didn't have any, I'm a PR marketing guy. Yes, I was a certified health coach, but it wasn't too hard to pass that. And I'm hearing all these different things. I got to go, like watch a lecture to understand what does deuterium mean, what does the electron transport chain mean, and all these different things. And wind up finding out, and here's why saturated fat is like the healthiest energy you can burn in your body. So much of what creates the metabolic dysfunction is the deuterium level in the food that you're consuming. And, so food is really two things. It's energy and it's amino acids. You're rebuilding your body because we're doing it continuously. Every time we take a breath, we are just every day in, day out, and especially at night as we do so much repair, where you need the amino acids in a complete amino acid profile. And that's why the bioavailability of the animal products are so beautiful. They're complete. There's nothing missing. They're in the right percentage. They're what we've been doing for millions of years. But when you start doing the vegetable oils, and instead of, I cook bacon once a week and then I save it in a mason jar and I pull it out and I throw it on the steak before I start heating it up. Or if I'm going to saute some mushrooms and onions, it's in bacon grease. But it's the lowest deuterium that you can cook in butter and which is also saturated fat. But all fat has saturated mono and poly in it. But it's a spectrum and how much of each. But once you start looking at this from a biochemistry and a quantum physics and what's going on inside of the electron transport chain, it's undeniable that if you are carnivore, this is why people are radically fixing themselves so fast, because they're killing the inflammation from the reactive oxygen species. They're breaking out of their insulin resistance so fast and becoming insulin sensitive so quick. And they've got all the nutrition that if they're also not killing themselves with excess of blue light and all these other things, and they're getting some sun and doing these healthy things that we've been meat, fish, eggs, and sunlight, nothing more demonized in the world than this, and they're the cornerstones of how we maintain, create, and reverse disease and regain health. And so yeah, I mean, for the last number of years, you would call me more of, I don't know if you could say there's a 5-6 week period of time where I've been 100% just meat, fish, egg only, where I haven't had some raspberries or I eat some olives. I'm huge, again, from Patrick Tewitt, who taught me the protocol on the heart disease and everything from here in Wisconsin on Ivor's channel. Sauerkraut, one of the best things you can do for vitamin K. And vitamin K is incredibly important for disease reversal. You get on all these heart disease user groups or groups on Facebook and Twitter and everything like this. And there's all the people like, oh, you don't need to be keto. You don't need to do all these different things. I can do this as a vegan or a vegetarian, and they can, but it's very hard to get low enough carb to really be long enough in nutritional ketosis when you're coming from that approach. And all the people that I know that have been doing the reversal of the plaques and all of these things have done it, not necessarily carnivore, but let's just say heavy, because if you eat enough meat as you're clearing it, we don't store amino acids like we store glucose. Gets turned to triglycerides, becomes stored body fat, excess glucose. So if we eat too much fat, it stores as fat. If we eat too much glucose, it stores as fat. We eat too much protein, it breaks down amino acids. We don't have a storage mechanism for that. It's going to eventually, again, turn to glucose and turn to fat. So one way or, and so depending upon if you're eating more than your lean muscle and organ tissue has the ability to absorb and use or whatever, it's just going to go to glucose anyhow. So it's just a matter of how long are you going to be in and out of nutritional ketosis. But if you're just eating a normal amount of meat, sardines, fish, eggs, whatever you're doing at it, you're naturally cycling out of nutritional ketosis for a couple hours as you're processing what's going on, but then you're fat adapted, you're right back into it, and you're back in healing mode. Well, a lot of these sugar burners who are constantly on that blood sugar roller coaster, they might hit an hour or two in the middle of the night of nutritional ketosis, but by the time they're eating or they're drinking their green smoothie the next morning, they're right back out of it again. So there's so much nuance and context into all of this stuff, but it's been so rewarding and learning, and there's so many great people, and I see it happening so fast with the red light therapy, with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all of these different things that you can do. I lived at Planet Fitness in the red light booth this 10 minutes every day over the winter and all, because we get snow in winters here in Milwaukee, and so from September 15th to about end of April, the sun doesn't get high enough that we get the UVB, and we can't tan and create the cholesterol or use the cholesterol to create the vitamin D and everything that we need. So you got to do it other ways. Saunas can help with that. Cold plunges can help with that. Red light isolated can help with that. Tanning that has red light in it is the best way if you're going to do some form of tanning bed for a couple of minutes or whatever. Anyhow, so yes, I everything that I go down, and the more deeper I get into these quantum biology and physics and understanding everything from an electron neutron standpoint of what's going on in your body and what deuterium does to destroy your mitochondria, it tells me that carnivore is by far should be the basis of what everybody's doing, based on where their metabolic health is, based on what their journey is, what their goals are. Can they afford some asparagus? Well, yeah, more seasonally, but I don't do it much in the winters anymore after what I learned the last year and a half. I'll still eat the sauerkraut because it's fermented, and that will work great with the microbiome and create all the K1, K2, MK7 that I need for the making sure my heart reversal stays where I want it to be. There's a supplement I take for that as well. But if I can get it from food too, and here's kind of one thing that I've learned from all these, what I'll call the gurus that, in the circadian and quantum biology aspect. If your body makes something, don't take it as a supplement, because it's not in the form that the body can use. And as you're just like with sunlight, getting the vitamin D from the sun on your skin, well, there's 16 other things that are happening. Nitric oxide release and all these other things are great for opening up your vascular system and everything. And if you're just taking a vitamin D pill, you bypass all of the things that are happening that we evolved millions of years with. We haven't been sitting around with these receptors for 2 million years on all of our cells, waiting for a drug to be invented so we can be healthy.
Well said.
It's just not the situation. If we eat like our ancestors ate, don't go too far off the reservation. Don't destroy the terrain, the environment that you're living in, with light, with stress, with no exercise, all these things. But you don't have to exercise to achieve all of this. My client could barely walk, but I had her sitting outside with her feet in the dewy grass in the morning, looking east towards the sun and getting some sun on her and getting some free electrons from grounding and such, along with eating her eggs for breakfast and her steak at dinner and stuff. And so we take pictures of of our meals, and we send them. And I do this with a lot of my coaching people. That's how I'll send them some morning memes, and first thing in the morning, and then here's my first meal of the day. They send me their first meal of the day, and then we talk about any topic that came up on the memes, or we'll spend time talking during the day on what they need to know to understand to go do all of this. Some people can read it. Some people have such brain fog right now, they can't read the documents and retain it. They need to be talked through everything.
From what you said before about the industry and the consolidations and stuff, and the fact that there's people taking ketogenic diets seriously, it does sound quite positive.
And it's terrifying for what we'll call Goliath or the establishment. I mean, in this country, 23% of our GDP is healthcare world. And you start coming in, and you can start seeing in the literature now, or not in the literature, but the headlines, how the media is used. They'll come out with a study with no data. It's just an opinion piece that somebody will write about intermittent fasting causes heart disease. So they're trying to fight back. They're trying to, not let us really know what's going on. All, when this is fascinating. In 1986, I graduated college, and in 1988, or 87, I jumped into the health insurance world. And the first group health policy I had two financial bank and savings and loans that I sold to. My first two customers, single premium, $34 a month. Full family premium, spouse and kids with them, $130 a month. It's like $600, $700, $800, $900 for single premium now, and like $2,000 for family premium. You wonder why paychecks aren't going up, but all of our resources are going towards paying for healthcare. But when we started battling that, or the transition on all of that in the health insurance world became PPOs and HMOs, and so suddenly all of the hospitals, couple hospitals in town that used to compete against each other, they'd merge together, and then they start buying all the doctors' practices. And so now the doctors, instead of being independent business people and able to do what they want to do, well, now they have monthly meetings talking about how many procedures do you need to do, how many screenings do you need to do, how many scans do you need to do, how many, surgeries do you need to do to be profitable, and make sure you're only with them for 8 to 10 to 12 minutes, because you can, but you can't do anything as a doctor, and they're so limited in their education because all of these things I've just talked about are available in the literature and nobody knows about them. So just like I said, in 2018 and early 19, I broke my brain. The most fun thing I do in the whole world is breaking the brains of my friends that are doctors, because I go to bed every night happy and I sleep great. I wake up in the morning. It's not just because I'm healthier and all these other different things that come with all of this. It's because when I break a doctor's brain, and I've helped a doctor lose 100 pounds, I've helped a doctor reverse their heart disease, I've helped their shared diet doctor stuff with other doctor friends, and they gave it to their patients. They come back in 3 months later, 30 pounds lighter, and just waiting for the doctor to say, "Hey, did you notice I lost the weight on the stuff you gave me?" Well, it's something I gave the doctor. And so I'm just like, if I can break a doctor's brain every couple months, there's 1,000 people that I'll never ever meet that the ripple touches.
So, Brett, could you talk about how we can find you online? Can you talk about your website and the podcast that's coming up?
Sure. So, my buddy, the cardiologist I've described, Ryan, we are in the next couple of weeks. We're hoping later this week, next week, to kind of do the dry run first, before going through editing and everything of our first podcast. It's going to be called Metabolic Matters. In November, he was talking about creating his own podcast called Everything Metabolic. I was going to use Metabolic Matters as mine. I'm now going to use My Metabolic Life as my personal podcast. And so in the next, and we got Dr. Ben Bickman signed up as our first guest, and Ryan had him in to do grand rounds with all the cardiologists at his hospital in Provo, because Ben's from Provo too. So Ben's one of those doctors like Ken Berry and other people that I wound up introducing through my document to Ryan. And then he started reaching out to these, if you're a cardiologist, you call people, they all call you back. When you're just me, a salesperson, you have to fight through the door to get them to listen or pay attention or whatever. But anyhow, so over the next, probably we want to get 2, 3, 4 of them in the can to start being released, so that they don't become 2, 3 months apart, because it's been 7 months of talking, and with him having a number of different issues with being a doctor, and he bought a new house, it didn't work out well, they had to sell it, and all the things that go with all that, it's delayed us. Anyhow, so Metabolic Matters down the road, you should be able to find at YouTube and anywhere that podcast can be found. My website, which I'm just now finishing up, and hopefully by the time I'll have enough on there that it's useful for people, because I've been doing most of my stuff word of mouth so far and referral, is www.mymetaboliclife.com. And I'm just Brett at mymetaboliclife.com if anybody wants to reach out. But honestly, by the time hopefully this is released, we'll coordinate with all that all of that will be live for that. If not, anybody can reach out to me at smithbrett19@gmail.com, which is my personal email. That's how I've been doing everything up until right now. I've been waiting for the podcast to launch to kind of get all my ducks in a row with my online and social and everything type of representation. But then when this came up from our mutual friend Jeff last Sunday, and then Monday we chose to do this, I go, oh,
No worries. So I'll link to your emails and your website and everything below.
mm-hmm.
Um, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Brett. I really appreciate your time.
I've been looking so forward to this. I've watched so many of yours. And then when Jeff showed me that new 12-minute one you released this last weekend, just absolutely brilliant. He goes, "This is the best one yet. You got to watch it." And that was the conversation we're having that led to this happening today.